All right. Evening, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification course. You can be seated. Hope everyone has had a wonderful few days here. Here in Texas, we've been dealing with some extreme heat. And I figured if we can't beat the heat, well, we might as well bring the heat. And that's what we're going to do today in the class. So, well, at the very least, you can use some cool thoughts, right? Cool thoughts will cool you down, help you to feel better. Think about some nice. You ever see those guys that go and take a dip in the what they call it, the polar bear club or something like that, and they go and they jump in the water, in the middle of winter, and it's supposed to be very therapeutic. That's something I believe without seeing, but it probably will feel really great right now in these triple-digit days that we're going through. All right. So we're going to be continuing here in the Building Moral Excellence series, the advanced series of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And we are in Chapter 1, Character, My Foundation, and we've already gone through the introduction and note to the teacher, to the student, the preface, and laid down the foundation for what we needed to get into the chapter. We went through the procedure. We're in procedure 1, and let's see here, 2, I believe. Yeah, 2. We're actually in procedure 2 because we're covering pages 5 through 11. And we started last week, or wrapped up, I guess I should say. We started in the pre-assessment and finished over here on page 6 under what's the difference. And just to kind of refresh in case someone's just joining us, we do encourage you to go back, and those of our fellow teachers of peace online who are following along, go back and to the last 5 classes, and it'll bring you up to speed of where we are in this unit here. I believe Chris started it off there about 5 weeks ago. But right now we're on page 6 under what's the difference? What's the difference between what? Well, we're talking about character and personality, and that's the foundation that we start to lay in this first unit there, because you've got to know the difference. You have to know, the students need to understand the difference between those things, because as we read at the end of page 5 there, it says there that in that second paragraph, if you look at that last sentence, it says, when people are unclear about the differences between character and personality, they can make assumptions about each other that are inaccurate. All right, and it could be positive assumptions, it could be negative assumptions too. But when a person doesn't understand the difference between the two, then it could be easy for them to fall into that trap. So this is why it's so important that we lay this foundation in the minds of our students. And like I mentioned at the previous class, this could be a class where your students are coming in from the intermediate series transitioning into the advanced series. This could be a class also where your students have never heard anything about the Peaceful Solution. All right, this is their very first time hearing about the Peaceful Solution. So the concepts that we're learning tie right in line with the intermediate series. They tie right in line with the elementary series as well. It's just more age appropriate. But this is why it's important to start from the beginning, because if you don't lay that foundation, and all the way by the time you get to chapter 3 or 4 or 5 in this unit, your students are going to be kind of lost because they don't have all the building blocks so that they can build a positive and a strong character on a stable and strong foundation. All right, so we talked a little bit about that, and let's just read that definition there at the very top of page 6. It says, character is the combination of morals and beliefs. And we talked a little bit about beliefs last class. In fact, I've got the slide here that we have for the overhead there. It says, beliefs are a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion, or in other words, something believed. And you can find various definitions on that word belief. Another one is for belief is an idea about cons. Wait, no, I'm sorry. An idea one accepts as being true, right? An idea, just another way to phrase it, but it's an idea, that somebody accepts, or even in some of the definitions, it's used to describe how someone feels about a particular concept or idea, right? So we can see there that the combination, it's a combination, not just one of these two things, morals or beliefs, but a combination of morals and beliefs that dictates, and we talked about that last time, that controls or gives a command and so forth. And it includes a dictate, or how a dictate can be something that is also internal, something that we say to ourselves, kind of our self-talk, right? Our thinking, sometimes out loud when we're talking, sometimes we just think to ourselves, but how we think about the rules and how our thoughts direct or govern our actions based on rules that we've learned. Okay? So that's important as well. And without getting too far into this, how you believe or how much you believe in those rules are going to some degree, be a determining factor as to how diligently you follow them and how consistently you follow them. Okay? Because you can find, generally speaking, everybody will follow most of the rules some of the times, right? But very rarely do you find people who follow all of the rules all of the time, okay? And that's what we want to get our students to see the value in, when it comes to developing and maintaining a strong moral character. That phrase of what you do when no one's looking and becoming a person of integrity, that applies to all aspects of our lives, whether it's the child in school, whether it's the person at work, whether it's the child following their parents' instructions when their parents are home or when their parents not home, whatever the case might be. Rules are there to keep us safe. They're there for a reason. Even if we don't fully 100% understand the benefits of following those rules, us following them, irregardless of how great our understanding is, that's a part of a positive moral character, okay? And so it says here, they dictate how we treat others, our environment, and ourselves. Now, it is the basis on which our every thought, action, and decision is derived, and it is the means by which we distinguish between right and wrong, all right? And we talked about personality there, which says underneath that, or continuing, it says personality is the combination. So again, it's not any one thing, but it's a combination of your personal preferences, attitude. Now remember, attitude is just how you think and you feel about something, right? And I say this to my children, or just young people in general, all the time when I see them walking around and they got their lip hanging out and they got a frown and a scrawl on their face, and I'm like, what's with the attitude? I don't have an attitude. Like, yeah, you've got an attitude. Everybody's got an attitude. It's how you think and feel. Right now, it looks like you're having some negative thoughts, right? And you try to get them to examine themselves. Sometimes people do that so that they can draw interaction. They want somebody to ask them how they're feeling. And sometimes people don't even realize that they're looking that way, because how we feel on the inside, a lot of times it reflects on the outside, our facial expressions, tone of voice, and so forth. But it's our attitude, likes and dislikes, and our social skills, right? How we interact within society, whether that's a small group of friends or whether that's, in your neighborhood, in a family, around a big crowd of people that you've never met before. Okay, social skills are very important for having a healthy relationship with other people, understanding what they are, recognizing social cues, they call them. They say some people, they don't recognize certain social cues, like when a person kind of is disinterested in the conversation, they'll give off certain body language, like they're ready to go. They can't, they'll start looking at their clock, they'll start fidgeting with things. They'll be looking around, but you're still having a conversation, and the person's just blah 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 blah. They're not getting the social cue that, hey, it's time to cut this conversation off. Don't get me wrong. We like hearing about radiator bearings and stripe it paint, but this other person's ready to go. So, and then they give some examples about what personality could relate to. Music, food you like to eat, and so forth. So that's where we kind of left off last class, and how they come about by these things being inherited from our parents, referring to character and personality. Things we experienced, how and where we were raised. All of these played a part in the influence of our character and personality. And as we covered in the intermediate series concerning these things, unlike fixed traits, how we look, how tall we are, the tone or the color of our skin, the color of our hair, and things of that nature, our character is not fixed. It can be changed, right? We can alter the programming, so to speak, because remember, all of these things came from, I don't want to say pre-existing conditions, but they came from several different factors that entered into our minds, sometimes long before we were born, sometimes long before we even recognized or started to, think for ourselves. They were influencing factors that developed our character. And sometimes people, they don't realize that. They go way back and they think, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Mom or dad told me about certain things in their life, and this is how it caused them to think and react in certain environments. So they taught us this way, or they acted this way around us, and I picked this up as a child, and I didn't even know it. I don't know why I get frustrated when this takes place. I don't know why I have a short fuse, or I don't know why I get so sentimental, or why I like the ocean, or whatever the case might be. And sometimes they find out much later in life, but those are influences that come in from their childhood, their parents, their teachings, or their environment, or simply their experiences. And so those things form your character and personality. Now, we're going to move into the center part of the paragraph, or page there, and that's under the importance of morals to character. So now we're going to get the students to understand what morals are and how they relate to our character. Because when you think of morals, most of the time when people think of morals, they tend to go all, ideology, lofty thoughts and so forth. But we're going to see here that it's really not that complex. It says here, one of the key factors that separates and distinguishes. So we have something here in this word separates, which means to keep apart, to divide, and to make a distinction between. All right? To keep apart and to divide. So we're seeing here that in this, there needs to be a separation. All right? And a way to be able to distinguish. Because not everything is got a sign written on it, right? A person's behavior doesn't have a light flashing on top of their head that says this is immoral behavior taking place, or this is disrespectful, or this is an influence that can bring harm to you. Well, what the student is learning here in the Peaceful Solution, it gives them key factors to be able to distinguish for themselves based on what they've learned, what kind of behavior that is. If it's positive, if it's negative? Is it going to bring harm? Is it going to bring benefit? Okay, and they can start kind of autonomously do some thinking for themselves. So a key factor that separates and distinguishes character from personality is called moral principles. Okay, moral principles. In general, moral or ethical principles are universal. All right. In other words, people from all over the world would agree with them and uphold them. Morals refer to principles or beliefs. So we see that word beliefs in there. So when we combine that with what we talked about in the first paragraph, where you can see here how this ties exactly into this subtitle here of its relation to character. Okay, because that is what dictates our behavior. Principles or belief that govern the way people think and behave. All right, so that's in a nutshell, and you can even take what you're seeing here in the Peaceful Solution, and most most of the definitions, if you're careful, they relate in unity with what's being said here. Morals relate to human behavior, how people behave and interact with one another. The principles are what governs those morals. They're the rules that say, hey, this is right and this is wrong. And then we see here it says moral principles clearly separate what is right from wrong, and they are the foundation of character. So you can't really have morals without a rule to follow. Otherwise, you're just kind of making up your own thing. And how do we know we can't make up the rules as we go? Well, we just read here. Those principles are universal. Everybody would agree with them. Now, we can make up our own rules, and we might get 5, 10, or 15, or 100 people to agree with them. But there might be 1,000 who don't agree with them. Okay? So this is, a key indicator to us as we're reading this that, hey, rules like do not steal, right? Don't trespass on other people's property. Ask before taking or touching or borrowing. Don't murder. Don't kill people. Don't do things that bring harm to people. Everybody in the world can agree with that. They can agree that that's beneficial, okay, and that it doesn't take away or bring harm or hurt society in any way. In fact, if people just upheld the basic moral rules that govern human interactions in all cities, even small villages and tribes, they have moral or ethical codes. It might not be sitting on a big plaque down in the city center somewhere, but they have a certain moral and ethical code that they expect people to follow in order to ensure, continuity and peace and tranquility within their environment. But we know that they're moral and they're ethical principles because all people from all over the world would agree with and uphold them. All right. So then we get down, here into the same 3 basic categories of morality that we saw in chapter 1 of the intermediate series here of the character unit. So we have morality can be divided into 3 basic categories: behavior and attitude towards all life, right? All life, and that's plant, human, and animal. And we'll get into it because some people will value one thing but devalue the other, okay? You'll have people who value human life but they don't care about animal life. You have people that seemingly love animals more than they love humans, but morality, this first category here, talks about all life, okay? All life. I've seen people just walk by and just yank plants off of the body of the plant and look at it and throw it on the ground, And I'm thinking, why would you do that? Now if you're going to take a flower off and give it to your mom or somebody like that, or set it in the vase, that's a little bit different, okay? It's funny, I saw an article the other day. It was one of those strange science facts. They said that the smell, I think I mentioned this in the class one time, the smell of cutting grass, everybody knows that smell of fresh cut green grass. Here it's like the smell of dust because our grass is so brown and short. We don't get very much rain here. But normally in most places where you have nice green grass, you cut that grass and you get that fresh cut grass smell. They say that those are like chemical signals or hormones that the grass puts out to warn other blades of grass of danger, because they're being cut in mass. Now, you don't smell that. You don't smell that when you have cows or goats or grazing animals out in the field eating grass. They're doing the same thing that a lawnmower does, right? But a lawnmower is doing it in a very massive, very quick, sudden type way. And you get that smell that comes out. Well, it's interesting because it seems like when you cut the grass around here, not every time, but it's either cut the grass or wash your car, then you get rain, right? So if something's going out and causing that rain to come, maybe we need to wash our cars and cut our grass more so we can get more rain. All right, so you've got all life. And then number 2, you have behavior. Now notice here, It's your behavior and attitude. So it's how you act and how you think. And the two really go hand in hand. Now, you think about it on your own personal life. If you've gone into a situation, or you had to talk to a person, or you had to deal with something, and your attitude was really kind of on the, yeah, I don't really want to do this, right? Kind of negative or semi-negative, or however you want to word it, then that to some degree affected your behavior, okay? And you might have had to really fight with yourself internally to behave in a positive way in spite of your negative behavior. But when the two align in the positive, then you have a much easier time dealing with the situation or making a right choice. So that's why we have to take this into consideration, because remember, thoughts lead to feelings and feelings lead to action. So this is why the attitude is included in this basic category, the morality being divided into the three basic categories. So behavior and attitude towards possessions and property. Like we learned in the very early units on ask and ownership, everything belongs to someone. Ownership simply means it belongs to you, whatever it is. Everything that we can look at, wherever we go, it belongs to someone. The roads belong to someone. The street signs belong to someone. You know, I've gone in some of these backcountry roads, and you'll get to an intersection at a stop sign, and you'll just see the stop sign is just riddled with dings from, you know, bullets or rifle, shots. People just go and they shoot the stop sign, right? And they think it's just harmless fun. Nobody's getting hurt. Well, that sign belongs to somebody, whether it's the county or it's the city or the state or whoever. It belongs to somebody, and somebody had to pay for that sign to be made and placed there. Now, once they know about it, they're going to have to pay some more money to go and replace that sign. So they've actually trespassed and they've stolen from that county or that city by damaging that property. So had they been taught this and maintained a positive attitude and behavior towards possessions and property, they wouldn't make those decisions. And then lastly now remember, this is just the basic categories, okay? Lastly, it's behavior and attitude towards the environment. We wrapped up Chapter 7 and several of the units, and self-control and character and so forth, and respect unit and responsibility, and it really tied into a lot of other, pretty much all of them, how important our character is in regards to how we affect our environment around us, whether it's our immediate environment or whether it's our ecosystem as a whole. Okay, our character and the choices that we make and our behavior, can have an impact, whether, negative or positive, on our environment. So having these things in the student's mind, and this would be a great opportunity to kind of encourage them to write them down. Now, they might have a book and they can highlight it or underline it or whatever they can do, but something to kind of impress in their mind these three basic categories: life, possessions, property, and environment. That's how, when I was first starting to learn this, the information here, I don't try to like perfectly memorize things, but I try to put things in a way that I can recall it a little bit easier. Instead of having the entire phrase out, if I remember certain key parts about the phrase, like three basic categories: life, possessions, property, and environment, then I know that the first part is all the same. So, those are just little tidbits of information that you can give your students. And, even having these things written out in cards or banners. I remember in elementary school, we always had, in all the classes up to a certain grade, I guess maybe 3 or 4 or something, I don't even remember, but they always had the ABCs stretched out somewhere on big banners up high so all the students can see, because at that time in their formative years, they were still learning ABCs and maybe some sight words and so forth. So putting up reminders as a teacher, now this is where you bring in your creativity in your classroom, can be very helpful, because even though they might not consciously go in the room and read those things, subconsciously, remember, we talked about this before, those are influences like the billboards that you pass every day, the colors that you see in the stores and the restaurants that influence your impulse to purchase and and impulse, influence hunger, and so forth. You can put up quotes like this that'll influence the reminder of positive behavior, of positive attitudes, and so forth. All right, so now we start to get a little bit more in-depth, breaking down these three basic categories. And the first one here is behavior and attitude towards all life. And it says moral principles in regards to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and that all people have the potential to contribute to society. Now, this is an opportunity if you've received students or if possibly they were already your students from the previous classes in the intermediate series, and going back and rehearsing, not necessarily rehearsing the lesson, but bringing back to their remembrance the lessons on respect, right? Because everybody deserves respect. You know, all life is valuable and all life should be respected. And this is kind of a reiteration here without saying respect. It's really kind of saying the same thing, you know, that life is valuable and that all people have the potential to contribute to society. All right, and so that part's in bold there, which expresses the importance of it there. Let's see here. I have a note here. Oh, okay, never mind. That's toward the bottom there. All right, so now when you have a moral attitude towards others, you accept and appreciate. Now remember what we talked about appreciation. It means to value or admire highly, right? To value or admire highly, to judge with heightened perception or awareness. To judge with heightened perception or awareness. You know, I appreciate, you know, what you did for me, right? You know, you value what that person did for you. Like I said in the previous class, a lot of times people appreciate the lessons that their parents taught them after they've experienced some of the negative consequences that their parents warned them of later on in life. Then they can associate what their parents taught them with those experiences and what came about as a result. And through hindsight, they can appreciate the lessons that of the past, okay? And, you know, surely they'll teach their children that. And if it's not too late, you know, and that genes are already set, their children hopefully won't give them a hard time, but they might have to go through it again. And that seems to be kind of the pattern. Remember what we talked about with Jean, who was his name? Jean Lamarck. What was that guy's name? He was the naturalist, Jean-Baptiste Desmoulins Lamarck. I don't know, I always feel so French when I say that, you know. He was a French naturalist in the study of genetics, proposed that characteristics acquired during an individual's lifetime, this is on page 5 of the Character Unit Intermediate Series, are passed on to their offspring. What characteristics, is the question, are you acquiring and how will they affect your children? You know, and I remember it was a saying a long time ago, you know, when a parent was dealing with a somewhat unruly child, and the parent will go, I hope your children treat you the same way. I hope you experience what I'm experiencing with you. And a lot of times that child does. Why? Because they've set that pattern of behavior in their genetics. It's in their genes. Now, they could overcome that and do better later, but that impression and that memory is already set in that phase, that span of those genes. So when that child hits that same age as the parent was when they acted out that way, they're more inclined to exhibit those types of behaviors. And then the parent goes, well, I don't understand why they're acting like that way. I haven't acted that way for 20 years. No, you haven't, but you set the programming for that age in the child's life. And it takes several generations to work that out. It takes several generations of somebody recognizing that it's bad and consciously working it out of their genes for it to no longer be passed down to the next generation, okay? And this is how powerful, this is how strong genetics are. Now, we know through the study of epigenetics, those things can be changed. You can actually physically change the on and off switches of your genetic coding, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of internal programming, but it can be done. We just, the way that we're made, and science is continually being amazed with the different studies that they're finding as they're able to dive deeper microscopically and so forth into the body with their telescopes and their different experiences, how complex but plastic to some degree we are. They back in the early whatever century, 8th and 10th and 9th and 12th century or whatever, they thought the brain, once it was formed, that's it. It's just a pile of gray matter with electrical impulses in it. And then and they later on they found out, no, the brain is actually a complex series of wiring and neurons, and it's actually plastic. Not plastic like things we wear, but it can change. Right? It can change. It actually can physically change. Not that the more you learn, you're going to need a bigger hat, bigger helmet, helmet to wear or anything like that. But the brain actually does adapt to the food or the nourishment that it gets, which is learning, right? Learning new things. This is why they say, the dumbing down of society has been exacerbated through technology to some degree, right? Smartphones and tablets and things like that. Why? Because people don't need to use their brains to use those things. Okay? Where before, for when we were young, and most of us can remember that, in order to be creative, we had to go outside and do something. We had to imagine that we were flying through the air, all you got to do is pull it up on the internet now. Pull up a sim or something like that, or VR. You don't have to use your brain. And so as a result, there's no new neural connections being formed, and the brain, like a muscle, it's like going out and lifting weights, doing push-ups and running on a treadmill versus sitting on your couch eating chips and watching somebody else exercise. I just don't understand why my cholesterol is so high, doc. I watch 4 hours straight of exercise videos. Well, it doesn't work that way. You've got to physically get out there and do the work. And so this is why education is so important, and that's the first positive character trait in the peaceful solution, because the more we educate ourselves, the more we learn, and we retain more, quicker, and longer when we put into practice immediately the things we learn, the stronger our minds and our mind's capacity to absorb and retain knowledge will become. So anyway, when you have a moral attitude towards others, you accept and appreciate that everyone has the right to live in peace, safety, and security. You can demonstrate a moral attitude by being respectful towards all people. This means not taking advantage of others. Instead, you would treat them with care and concern. Now, when you think about those two words, care and concern, all we're lacking there is consideration, right? But we add consideration in there, and we get the definition of what? Respect. That's right. I heard it in somebody's thoughts out there. We get respect, to recognize the value of people and their belongings, and to treat them with consideration, care, and concern. Okay? And so this is very important, because as you see here, we just covered here, everyone has the right to live in peace, safety, and security. And this brings to mind the things that we see on the internet with the conflicts and the scrimmages that are taking place all over, especially right now in Israel, the Middle East there, and the Golan Heights, and Iran, and in the other areas, Lebanon, and the rights of these people have been taken away from them. They've actually been stolen, because the majority of the people who are suffering right now have nothing to do with the conflicts of the leaders. Nothing to do with it. But they're the ones taking the biggest hit, the biggest brunt. They've been displaced out of their homes, what they've built lifetimes, sometimes generations, building, have just that quick, it's destroyed. Loved ones have been lost, loved ones have been killed, men, children. Those bombs are absolutely indiscriminate, but it's because they're not demonstrating this moral attitude and moral behavior towards all people. If they recognize that all people deserve respect, you know, then they would go about resolving the conflict in a peaceful way. But the problem with a lot of society is it's a strike first or be struck attitude. You know, it's preemptive. Well, I need to go ahead and take these people out so that they don't have the opportunity to do harm to us. Well, as we can see, for many, many years, none of those patterns of thinking have ever, you know, check it out for yourself, brought about peace. Okay? They might have lowered the retaliatory measures if you hit them big enough, but it's not because they're having peace or they've achieved peace. You know, peace can only come when two people agree or two parties or groups agree to uphold moral principles that doesn't take advantage of one party, nobody has the upper hand, but is equal and beneficial to all. Let's look over to page 7 here as we continue with the moral principles in regards to human life. So we see the benefit there, right? Everybody has the right to live in peace, safety, and security, and this means not taking advantage of others. Instead, you can treat them with care and concern. Now, we look at an immoral attitude, because you need to know, remember what we said here at the very beginning of importance of morals to character, one of the key factors that separates and distinguishes. So this is what we're doing here. We're giving the students the definitions or the information so that they can clearly distinguish between the two. An immoral attitude towards life consists of behavior that devalues, belittles, and hurts others both emotionally and physically. Behavior includes name calling, teasing, bullying, and prejudice causes others to feel inferior or causes them to feel less, right? It's the opposite of superior, right? Superior being above and inferior being less. Physically hurting others includes being aggressive and violent to the point of even murdering someone. And that takes place, sadly, you know, it's so commonplace in society today that when you hear about something like that, it's not, very rarely is it appalling to someone, right? When you hear about you know, and I just seen something the other day where, you know, a single mother was beat to death, you know, by her boyfriend, right, or ex-husband or something like that. Usually it's those type of things take place by someone that they know, you know, and it's like, you know, people's lives are being drastically changed in these instances, but it's become so commonplace in society. It very rarely, you know, makes like what we would call big news anymore. It's just like a little article that you see just to kind of seems like to fill a space. Why? Because society has become so desensitized to it. You know, we see it on the news, we see it on the television, we see it in movies, we hear about it being performed in songs and in video games and so forth. So, you know, people have just become very numb to these types of things, but until it affects them. Now, when it affects us personally, then it's like, whoa, man, you know, this is bad. You know, I really would that people would pay more attention to this. And that's when you get the advocates, right? Not to say that they didn't care before, but some people, when things hit close to home, then they advocate for certain things like exploited and missing children, mothers against drug driving, and things of that nature. Physically hurting others includes being aggressive and violent to the point of even murdering someone. It also consists of behavior that violates, such as rape. Now, those who have an immoral attitude about human life often direct acts of cruelty towards those who are weaker or unable to defend themselves, as in the case of abuse of children and the elderly, right? And it's, well, we'll get into it. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. Elderly. Every year, countless children are physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. This abuse results in lifelong emotional scars permanent physical injuries, and in some cases, death. In some cases, death. Abuse of the elderly also involves physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And it's pretty disturbing because, I think I or either some of the other teachers have brought some of the instances in the news and the cases where, people who have they put their loved ones into facilities that they trusted were going to take care of them because they needed pretty much 24-hour, medical care and so forth. Not always was it an elderly person. Sometimes they were young, like a person who, there was an instance where a young lady, she was in a car accident and she was in a coma. She was comatose, right? And so they put her into, a nursing home, I guess, possibly is what it was. And that girl, being in a coma, ended up pregnant. She ended up pregnant in a coma, which is an indication that she was being abused by the very people that were entrusted to care for her. Okay? And these are things that take place on a regular basis. And it occurs with the elderly too. They don't end up pregnant, but these things do take place as well. Not only that, I've read articles where people have even, trespassed on people who were sent to the morgue to be processed for a funeral. This is how low a person can get in their mind and in their thinking, that these things become, like, remember what William said, people wanting to go out and fulfill their lust, and not thinking about those impulsive choices and the consequences that they'll bring. Well, there's consequences with everything. And this is what can occur, permanent physical injuries, and in some cases, even death. Did you know that in addition to displaying an immoral attitude towards others, individuals could also display the same attitude towards themselves? Choices that involve risk-taking behaviors such as premarital sex, unsafe driving habits, and drug and alcohol abuse are examples of ways in which millions of people devalue their own lives. And it was just a story that had come across. It was a young lady who she was in a car with her boyfriend and somebody else, and she ended up driving 100+ miles an hour, and then crashing. And the boy and the other guy, I think they perished in the crash. She didn't. I don't know how she escaped unscathed. It seems like that's how it occurs sometimes. But she just recently was sentenced. It was a deliberate act. The courts determined, because there was some issues taking place there. But sometimes people have this mindset, well, if I can't do certain things, then I'm going to take out as many people as I can in the process. The old saying, you always hurt the ones you love and so forth, but they also do it to themselves. And so these driving habits are a thing. Drug and alcohol abuse, these are examples in which millions of people devalue their own lives. And I can see, and I've talked to, and I'm sure many of us have talked to or experienced ourselves personally, the thoughts and feelings of, well, what's the use anyway? Well, why, nobody cares. Who's going to care? I might as well just, drink myself into a hole or do whatever it is that, takes your mind off of the problem. It doesn't take away the problem. It just numbs the pain of the problem for a period of time until that numbness wears off. You've ever gotten a shot in your mouth because you had to go get some dental work, I'm allergic to pain, personally. I'm allergic to pain. I break out in crying. I'm not ashamed of that. But you get that Novocaine in there, and they work on your teeth, and then if they do something where they get into the nerve or too close to it, after that, I don't know if it's Novocaine anymore, whatever it is, after that starts wearing off and that numbness starts going away, then you start feeling the pain again, right? And this is the same thing that takes place when people do drugs or, alcohol or whatever it is. That stuff doesn't last forever. And the sad thing about it is your body, remember we talked about that plasticity and so forth, it adapts. So that 1 or 2 drinks that used to get you to that, loopy, numb feeling doesn't work anymore. Now you need 4. Now you need 5. Now you need a bottle. Now you need 2 bottles, right? In the meantime, instead of dealing with the problem, you're starting to damage organs. You're starting to damage your kidneys, your liver, your brain, your blood vessels, and so forth, because there's consequences to everything we do. There's a cause, there's an effect. Well, this type of behavior here is the leading cause of sexually transmitted diseases, degeneration of the mind and health, and also death. Now remember, our mind, if our minds aren't functioning properly, then we're going to make decisions that further deteriorate our health. We're not going to make wise and healthy choices. We're not going to avoid risk-taking behaviors. Okay? And so, sometimes these things that people do when they do certain drugs or even alcohol, they call that liquid courage or courage in the bottle sometimes. They take away or they deaden the part of your brain that avoids risk, right? That lowers your inhibitions to do things. You can also get this through foods sometimes as well. There's been instances and articles where people have eaten certain foods, particularly pork, and the parasite called trichina has gotten into the brain, made its way up to the brain, and there was a gentleman who actually thought, because the inhibitions were gone, he thought it would be pretty cool to get on top of my car and surf down the road. And he did, right? Because he didn't have that cognitive ability there, because something was blocked because of something that he ate, a parasite that was in that food that made its way up to the brain and cut off that sense of reasoning, right? He literally was not in his right mind, and he died as a result of it. But of course, upon autopsy, they found out that actually was what he had in his brain, and that parasite took control of it. So self-mutilation here, continuing on page 7, which is willfully cutting one's own body, and suicide are additional ways in which individuals disregard their own life. And that's a very big thing, self-mutilation. A lot of times parents don't even know that that's taking place with their child, and it's because it's kind of bigger with the youth. It might be a little bit with older generation, possibly too. Usually they get into other things, but it can be hidden for a long period of time, and it's psychologically speaking, it's a coping mechanism. Like crying is a coping mechanism. When you cry, you release certain hormones in the brain that lessen the pain. Okay, and so people do these things sometimes not knowing why or what they're trying to achieve, or even why they feel the way that they feel. But this gives the student, and it might trigger something in their mind, to think about, wow, I do that too. I didn't realize that I was devaluing myself by doing that. I didn't realize that this was a result of an immoral attitude towards life, and particularly my own. So that's why it's important to cover these things. And then you see that right there in the middle, underneath the paragraph, you've got the whiskey, the needle, the prescription pills, the beer, and then on the right there you see the things that can block you to building and maintaining a positive character, or achieving many positive things in your life. The STDs that come from immoral sexual practices, chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea, HPV, herpes, AIDS, and many, 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 many more. I think that it's up to like 120 or 140 or something different variations of human papillomavirus in existence currently. And a lot of scientists say that a majority of the population has HPV in some form in their bodies, because it was a big push some years back that the health community was pushing to give these HPV shots to the young women so that it can prevent them from developing cervical cancer and so forth. right? But it creates a lot of concern from the parents was, hey, this will create a false sense of security for my children, right? Because I don't want them engaging in certain other actions that can contribute to the formation of cervical cancer. But you don't hear that very much anymore. I don't know if it's wasn't making the money that they were hoping it would, or that it didn't do what they were hoping that it would do, because you have 1 or 2 or 3 vaccines for a particular disease. Well, what about the other 100? And as we know, as we've seen over the last 3-4 years, right, with viruses, they mutate. They don't stay the same. They adapt, and they avoid detection. They avoid the immune system. They avoid vaccines and so forth. So science has to keep adapting to try to chase something that's already got, a 10-foot head start on them. All right, let's look at the next paragraph there. This is behaving morally regarding the possession, property of others, which is the second part of our attitude towards possessions and property, means to recognize that everyone owns things and that there are inherent, this is vested in someone, a right or privilege. Inherit. It's that person's right or something that they're invested in. It's theirs. It belongs to them. So they have inherent rights of ownership, and all humans have that right of ownership, even if it's just the clothes, the shoes that they're wearing. That they've legally, and I do say legally and lawfully obtained. People can steal clothes and then wear them, and they say, possession's 9/10 of the law. If I got it, then I own it. It's mine. No, it still belongs to the owner. You're just wearing stolen property is all, okay? But if they've legally obtained those things, then that's theirs. Whether it's little or great, everybody owns something. Let's see here. Rights of ownership here. It's moral, this phrase here, rights of ownership, because you'll find it in many of the legal jargon books that you'll find in the laws of the land, wherever you might be. Moral and legal entitlement to have something or to act in a certain way, right? The rights, that's the moral or legal entitlement to have something or to act in a certain way. Simply put, this means that you have authority to make decisions concerning your belongings. You also have the right to have possessions without fear that another person would take your belongings without your permission. Recognizing this moral concept means accepting that everyone has authority and rights of ownership concerning his or her possessions as well. And I tell you, there's no feeling like working hard and obtaining something only to later have it stolen from you, to have it trespassed. Even if it's just a temporary thing, somebody, like we saw the example of the boy borrowing the bike and came back in and he told his mom, quick, call the police, somebody just stole my bike, and only to find that his brother had taken it for a ride around the block. And he's like, I'm only borrowing it. Well, remember what it means to borrow. It means you have the owner's permission to use their belongings for a particular amount of time. You can't just take it and say I'm borrowing it. Like the example was given, the guy stole the car, and then he brought it back and the police wanted to arrest him. He was like, hey, I was just borrowing it. I brought it back. Now it doesn't work that way. Now they do have things nowadays, like what they call ride share, I think, where people actually can go and borrow a car. Like you've seen these little scooters around, maybe not around here, but in Abilene, some of the bigger cities, they have the little moped thing, the little electric scooters, right? And you can, get an app and you can pay for the use of that scooter. That's the owner giving you permission for a particular amount of time, and you can just take it and leave it in a particular place later. Well, they have the same thing with cars as well. Like I think that might be what they're calling the ride share thing, where you can go use an app, And you can use the person's car for a particular amount of time within a particular distance of space and then take it and park it someplace else. Now it's legal to just borrow a car now, but you still, by agreeing to those terms and conditions and paying for the use of that vehicle, you're still, by default, getting the owner's permission. Now, if you were to just take it, well, you're stealing at that point. All right, let's look over to page 8. We're at the top of the page here. It says you can have, or you can behave morally in respect to ownership by asking permission before, and that's the key word there, before. Before. And I try to express this to, to my children, when they go and they do something, and I'm like, ask. But ask before you do the thing that you're wanting to do, or before you grab the thing that you're wanting to use. Always get permission. Now, if the parent or the teacher or the, authority says, hey, why don't you bring it to me? I don't know what you're talking about. I need to see what you're describing here. And then that's a little bit different, okay? But sometimes it's necessary, or mostly it's necessary, to ask before, as we see here, touching or using someone's belongings. Always ask before touching or using someone's belongings. This shows respect to that person and his or her rights of ownership, but asking alone is not enough. Now, here's the clincher, right? You can't just ask and then just wait till they turn around and then go take it. Well, I asked you. I don't know what the problem is. I asked. Why are you so upset? I did what you told me to do. I asked. Whoa. But did you accept the answer? You see? And this is what we see here. In the next sentence, you must also accept his response, even if his answer is no. Like we put into the elementary series, no is okay. As we put into the intermediate series, when we're talking about peer pressure, tell them no and mean it. Say no and mean it. You don't have to give an explanation for it. And a parent doesn't always, or a teacher might not always have to give you an explanation as to why you can't use or do something. In this case, it would be somebody's possessions or belongings, right? Because the very next question usually is, but why? But why can't I use it? Why can't I have it? Could you imagine barging into a hotel and say, I need to stay at a room for a night. They've got this big convention going on here and I need a room. Well, sir, we don't have any rooms available. So essentially the answer is no. But why don't you have any rooms available? Do you know who I am? Just give me those keys off the back wall. I'm going to go, well, I don't think they keep keys on the back wall anymore. But no. And you accept the answer and you move on. And this is sometimes hard to accept for people, especially when they have their mind already predetermined that yes is going to be the answer. It kind of is like being thrown in a pond of cold water. It's a shock to their system when they realize, oh, wow, I can't just do whatever I want, or I couldn't do what I expected to do. Authority over your possessions means you have the right to decide who uses your belongings, when it is used, and how it is used. Not being able to accept someone's decision about his belongings, notice what it shows here. It shows disrespect, causes hurt feelings, and, of course, can lead to conflicts. And many conflicts come as a result because sometimes people who don't accept the answer, they actually take those things by force. In the case of robbery, give me your wallet. Give me your watch. Well, no, this is my father gave this to me. No. Well, then they take it by force. They didn't accept the owner's answer to that. The fact that they were robbing somebody shows that they didn't have much value for the rules to begin with. All right, so we're going to stop right there on page A under that first paragraph. We'll pick up on the next paragraph under can you recall a time when you made a decision? And that's on page 8 in the Building Moral Excellence, chapter 1. The next class will be our teacher David here, and he'll be starting class this upcoming Sunday, August 11th at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope that you'll all join us. Thank you for joining us this evening, and have a wonderful evening or day. We'll see you later.